Hello and welcome to the Big Debate on S3, SABC News Channel 404, YouTube and TikTok. My name is Thembekile Mrototo. In this special Big Debate, we look back at how our attitudes to the issue of race have evolved since democracy. So in 1994, we were the so-called Rainbow Nation. Our urgent task was to restore dignity for the black majority. And it appeared for a while that everyone was on board, but pretty soon the cracks appeared. We heard about the enemies of transformation, white monopoly capital, or BEE fronts. Students called for decolonization of the curriculum. And day by day, many South Africans told stories of how whiteness was still a factor in everything from job promotions to service at banks and even restaurants. What then have we learned and where are we now? Well, to help us discuss this, we're joined by journalist Ayanda Sishi-Wigzell, veteran comedian Mark Banks, fellow at the Institute of Race Relations, Gabriel Crouse, black consciousness activist Shandu, Lexi, aka Sunny Bunny Honey on TikTok, Zethu Gqola, a commentator and marketing guru, as well as Bothale Nompumelelo, an activist and social media commentator. Welcome to you all. Well, you at home are also welcome to share your thoughts on our socials. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, and on TikTok. So, do you remember Gillian Skitter? She woke up on the 2nd of January 2013 and started the new year with a letter to white South Africans, asking them to apologize for apartheid. As you'd imagine, her letter was not well received. The most prominent white South African to ever apologize actually for apartheid was the former president, F.W. de Klerk, who only did so by video after his death in 2021. Have a look.
Social activist and filmmaker Gillian Skitter caused a stir on social networks recently after she wrote an open letter to white people asking them to apologize collectively for apartheid.
Well, if whites acknowledged the role of history and the facts and privilege, it would transform the social debate in our country. Apologize for not actually recognizing your privilege.
Our white compatriots, all of you, have to accept you all benefited from apartheid.
I think it's a lot of bull. In the sense, I was born in 1954. If you can tell me what benefits I gained from apartheid, I'll tell you zero.
The apology still remains relevant for us because what that has to do is to do with levelling with our fellow South Africans. It has to do with getting ourselves into an honest relationship with the past. And if we aren't being honest about our difficult past, we aren't being honest about anything.
An apology should not be a verbal apology that would go down, but an apology would be accepted to give us back the economy because everything that was taken from us was illegal.
I think an apology would perhaps assist to deal with some of the arrogance that emanates from our white fellows, particularly in business.
So that was about a decade ago, 30 years into democracy. Should those apologies still be coming, Jackie?
I think that's somewhat missing the point. Racism is a system of unequal power relations. So dealing with racism means reversing those unequal relations. And beyond that, we can look at social cohesion programs, which will obviously include things such as repentance, remorse, asking for forgiveness, really acknowledging the wrongdoing. But I think for the most part, our conception and discourse on race and racism is very shallow and intellectually wanting.
Mark, you lived through the apartheid years. Should white South Africans apologize for what happened before 94?
Yes, whether it be in the form of money or in the form of a sentence, an embargo. You did that in the past and now we're going to take over and you will suffer the consequences. I don't know how one would proclamate it. Just being a money thing where you have to pay for the sins of the past and you get your book stamped to say, I've paid up and I'm very sorry and you've paid 10% or whatever. I don't think that is going to root out the racism that there still is. I thought it would all be easing now. I thought we'd be coming together and, you know, I don't want to have a guitar moment and start singing Kumbaya, but we don't seem to be going anywhere.
Bothale,
very disconcerting.
Why haven't we been able to rid this society of racism?
When we talk about land back, the fact that the same townships that were used to segregate the people, they still live there, and those townships form part of the perception that black people are a certain way, stereotypically criminal, or they're just incapable of looking after themselves. So if we aren't able to resolve that first issue, we won't be able to know exactly how to untangle the real experiences that people have with the perceptions that we have of them. For white people, they need to deeply understand, firstly, that them continuing to benefit from the structures that are in place, very few of them have to think about living in a township. Very few of them have to think about being poor. The fact that that's something that seems like a natural fact for them will always continue to blind them from them seeing that racism is what caused this and not the fact that black people or non-white people are a certain way.
Gabriel, firstly, are you apologetic, and what real action, if so, would you pair that with?
I'm certainly not sorry for perpetuating apartheid because I had no hand in it. I think that it was an evil and wicked system and certainly to be regretted. I think that race relations are a difficult thing to talk about. People find it very easy on TV in South Africa to speak about all blacks or all whites as if those groups are monolithic. Of course, there are great varieties within those groups. There are some white racists. Just this weekend, I was looking at a white guy that I've done a YouTube show with, Roman Kabanak, tweeting things that are clearly racist, getting attention out of that. That's very bad. The Institute of Race Relations has done several polls asking people, who do you think is the biggest racist in politics in the country? Most people say Julius Malema.
Okay.
To say Julius Malema is obviously a racist is not to say that all black people are obviously a racist. There's a huge difference between races and huge differences within races. The economy is smaller than it was in 2010. Black unemployment has doubled since 2008. But in terms of the racial composition of the middle class and the upper class, according to Stats SA's latest numbers, black people are the majority of every income stream in South Africa.
Ayanda, to say you look less than impressed would be the understatement of the year.
Yeah, I really am trying my best to not be shocked at what I'm hearing. Of course, it's going to be beneficial for white people to say that there's nothing to apologize for. You brought up numbers of unemployment and the economy, but you seem to forget the fact that for a good couple of hundreds of years, black people were not allowed to get into the formal economy of the apartheid country here. When you're talking about your polls and saying that Julius Malema is the biggest racist in this country, what shocks me is the ability to even say that a black person can be the biggest racist in the country when black people cannot even benefit anything institutionally from this power dynamic that was created by who? By white people. The white male race did this. They created apartheid. They created the world economic system that we are all beholden to. And unfortunately, we are now suffering because of that. For you to sit there and have the audacity and the gall to say that a black man is the biggest racist in this country, you must say that according to your audience of the IRR, Julius Malema is the biggest racist in the country. What you're painting is a picture that is simply not true.
Lexi, as a younger South African, your take?
I am also quite offended. It just shows that white people have so much privilege.
We're all the same, right?
Please don't disturb her, she's speaking. Yes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but my voice is not land. You can't colonize it. So for me, white people have so much privilege to be able to avoid talking about topics like this. Because you said racism is a difficult conversation for you to have. Black people do not have the privilege of avoiding the conversation because they live in those conditions. Their entire beings are tied to that, and they somehow have to make it out of the townships. They have to make it big for their family. And then added on top of that is the guilt that so many successful black people feel because they don't believe they deserve that success, while the rest of their family is at home, still under this big boot of the white man. So no, please don't tell me that white people do not owe us an apology, because they do. And they have never given us that apology.
Do you want to withdraw your comment, Gabriel, having heard what both Lexi and Ayanda have said?
Ayanda said that the poll should refer to the IRR audience, but that wouldn't be true. The people who said that Julius Malema is the biggest racist in the country were randomly selected And that polling question has been done more than once. So I'm not saying what I think. I'm just saying the upshot of a particular exercise. I also didn't say that I forgot the legacy of white oppression, of racism. The boots of the white man certainly came down on every black person that it could in South Africa since the Union. The thing is that black unemployment has doubled since 2007, 2008. So it's important to recognize that history didn't end in 1994 with apartheid. There's been a whole new story since then. And in that
Thanks to who?
The people in charge, according to me, are the president, the ruling party. I've heard here that black people can't be in power. They can't benefit from the system because maybe democracy was invented by white people. I dispute that. I think democracy is a universal principle. I think our constitution was written by people of all colors and it binds us all as South Africans together. And in our constitution, the president benefits, the cabinet benefits, parliament benefits. Those are the people who have the most power, the power of the army, the power of the police force. The ANC in the 2000s did a good job. Black unemployment reduced substantially by 2.5 million. The piped water rollout, houses, electricity, the improvement of education standards. The Rainbow Republic was not just a Mandela dream, it was a very lived...
So it started well, but now it's also the fault of those very black people that things are as they are, is what you're suggesting.
Jeremy Cronin, there's white people in the ANC as well. There's colored people. It's not about race.
Of course it's about race. This is what happens when you leave your oppressors totally unpunished. You perpetuate this amnesia, this arrogance, this denialism. Anyone who has any capacity to analyze data in this country will tell you that South Africa has become an even bigger white supremacist, anti-black racist neo-colony under a guise of constitutional democracy.
And who do we blame for that?
In the main, we blame the white ruling class of South Africa, working with the international system of imperialism, in particular London and America, in muzzling the ANC and pushing it against. Let me tell you what should have happened
briefly
in 1994. The land should have been returned unconditionally, unreservedly. It was never the land of white people. They imposed themselves, and from the moment they were here, atrocities came. 2, just like it was done to Germany, there should have been reparations. Let us go back to Jan van Riebeeck.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far back, and we're going to talk about reparations. Mark Banks, Jackie started off by saying what we're hearing from someone like Gabriel is the result, basically, of not having punished sufficiently the people who are the oppressors in this country. Should there be punishment?
Yes. If not punishment, there should definitely be a reparation of some sort, or a re-educating or a realignment of the way things are going to be or the way things should be. And I don't know what that is.
I'm going to go back to your point about the ego and your question about should white people apologize? Will we get the apology? We never will, because getting the apology is relinquishing of power. And that is getting the most problematic is the white man, you know, white women too, but the white man. For us to get the apology, white people have to see us as equals. And for as long as there are people in the rural areas, people in the townships, people who are struggling, people who are poor, people who have never had the same experiences or the same luxuries, not all white people will ever see us as equal. And you do not apologize to someone unless you see them as a fellow human being.
So when we return, we will look back to the TRC, the compromises made at CODESA, and the issue of reparations. You're watching The Big Debate. Welcome back to the special edition of The Big Debate. We are looking back at race and racism in South Africa. In 1994, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established. Apartheid perpetrators were then encouraged to come forward and fully disclose their actions in exchange for amnesty. The TRC was also urged to offer reparations to the victims of the brutal apartheid regime. Have a look back at this now from 2009.
Each month, members of the Katlehong branch of Khulumani support group meet. They are the survivors of the political violence that was typical of the apartheid regime. The organization was set up in 1995 during the build-up to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. One of the recommendations of the TRC was for those recognized as victims to receive a reparations payment of 30,000 rand. Only an estimated 10% of them have received this grant.
Minister Gqola, myself and others, there were certain things we had traditionally agreed upon that we are not going to transform or improve or reform apartheid. We're going to destroy it and all its institutions. But the CODESA negotiation actually took over the institutions of the apartheid regime.
The fact of the matter is where we are now as a nation is that we have to fit into the way the global economy works. Because if you try to subvert the way that the economy functions globally, then you end up like Zimbabwe is, begging your neighbors.
The compromises were not about compromising black people. They were about the system of oppression and its representatives.
Kuyo yonke lento ukuthi ulungiselela ebelungiselela aba bantu basezantsi ba mabacinezeleka ngaphezulu koba babecinezelekile ngela xesha le-apartheid kuba sifunqule sonke le ndlela yoba sidilize le-apartheid kuba bicinezela thina sonke bantu bamnyama ngenxa yokuthi mina bangithi ngiyongena etoilet la kwami mina liyanuka liyawela ngihleli mina emkhukhwini
Ayanda, reparations came up a lot as far as what people wanted post-1994. Was it a mistake to not grant those in the 90s?
Yes, it was a grave mistake. I think that the TRC was a wonderful opportunity for reconciliation, but it was done wrong.
It was a scam.
Thank you. I believe that it was a scam.
How so?
Because there was no legal recourse that came afterwards. The TRC was an opportunity for there to be reconciliation, an opportunity for there to be reparations paid, an opportunity for scars to be healed. And we need to understand that the Rainbow Nation could not have been built in 4 years. This TRC system, a great system, but it was shoved down our throats. We were forced to forgive. And that's what ends up happening, is that we have an economy that has been now sold to the highest bidder. Instead of putting a plaster on a gaping wound, we were meant to actually take out that wound altogether and repair it from the bone upwards.
Gabriel, is what Ayanda is saying making sense? You do understand the weight of the feeling and what she says should have been done in the 90s?
Yeah, I think it is understandable. I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission left most people kind of a little bit let down, and there's a great number of reasons for that. Part of the reason I talk about the polling, which is randomly done, not with anyone's particular audience, is because...
By your organization, am I right?
Also by a range of others.
Okay.
Afrobarometer, for example, which is run by people with quite a different ideological perspective, but they find the same thing in terms of people's responses to the question, have race relations improved or not? Because if you're in a room with people like us, everyone here has some kind of public-facing personality. There's a kind of brand on sale. And so that brand can go with saying, like, all whites are like this and all blacks are like that. My brand is different. I want to say, within the white group, some people are really good, some people are really racist.
The point I was trying to make is this. The problem with apartheid is that it wasn't an individual project, it was a system.
Yes.
And that is why people want a holistic response and a righting of the wrongs. It was something that was legislated and implemented, whether you were actively using the K word, or if you benefited.
Or even not alive, like me. But I agree, it was systemic. And so if you take, this is why title deeds are such an important example. The fact that 80% of black South Africans didn't own their land, couldn't sell their land, couldn't bank, and therefore couldn't build generational wealth. That is a crime against humanity. That is a hugely important part of why we are where we are today. The only way to address that is by having title deeds issued to the 17.5 poor black South Africans living on untitled land.
That's not the solution.
Saying sorry is not going to give those people something that they can bank, something they can hand down to their children. Systemic problem means government problem. Systemic solution means government solution.
Got you?
That's just sheer hogwash. White people continue to benefit from ill-gotten property, which is land and the riches. Reconciliation has to be preceded by justice. And what justice does, it says to white people, the land was never yours, number one. It comes back to its rightful owners. You used brute force. The frontier wars in the Eastern Cape, Isandlana with Amazulu, with Uqetshwayo, with Utingane, with Makado in Venda, with the Sekukune, Gubapedi. I can go on and on about how African kingdoms, uprooted by these very barbaric aliens. If you want to rectify that, you've got to begin there and say, everything you have is illegitimate.
Gabriel, you laughed while Jackie was speaking. What in everything that he said was amusing?
He said that everything was peaceful and stable here until the alien barbarians arrived, as if whites are a different species, and also as if the Thembekile, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, please
a white myth.
Okay, so it's a white myth that there was a sort of conquest under Shaka Zulu in which lots of people died. I think we're fundamentally the same. Black people, white people, colored people, Indian people, people across the world. If you take large numbers, you find most people are reasonable, common sense, want to work, want to tend to their families, want to spend time with their friends. It is only by having a racialized
But you are land thieves. In
lens
this context, you are land thieves. Will
that,
you return
that
the
you
land?
come to the position where you think everyone who's white is evil, is a dispossessor, is a barbaric alien, and where you think you can say that on primetime national television and people are going to like you. And what the polling suggests is 25% of people will like you, but 75%
Slavery is
disagree
barbarism.
from all races. Most people just don't think like that.
Is colonialism not barbarism?
It is barbaric.
Is it apartheid not barbarism?
Absolutely barbaric.
Let's allow some other voices into the conversation.
15% of this country is living on 90% of the wealth. And I can tell you that 15% is not made up of majority black people.
It is, according to Stats SA.
No, that's nonsense. Please, man, please.
I got this.
Get
I
off
got
the
this,
crack pipe,
I got
man.
this. You've got to stop disturbing us when we speak. And we do let you speak and we do let you finish your point. But your privilege comes in when you have the audacity to speak over me and think that you have the authority to do so.
You have the audacity to say things that aren't true and pretend that they are true and pretend that you have authority because of your race.
I'm not saying that I have authority because of my race. What I'm saying is that I'm trying to correct the misinformation and disinformation that is coming out of your mouth. Points that I was saying is that the amount of black people that have access to wealth in this country is astronomically low. But when you look at the people who are controlling the means of production that actually bring the wealth in this country, those are white people. Those are white men.
What's your
source?
Stats SA would be a starting point. You can go to people like Oxfam. I mean, even Goldman Sachs. You can go to IMF, for goodness sake. Their report on inequality in South Africa, they will tell
Inequality is great.
Gentlemen, hold on, because Ayanda did want to finish her point.
You also mentioned Mfecane, right? And I want to just emphasize to people that here on the African continent, where's my camera? Here on the African continent, we were living well before white people came here. We had a history before colonialism.
Right.
As Gabriel said, black people are not a monolith. And that is true, we are not a monolith. And so this notion that we were fighting amongst each other and fighting amongst ourselves and white people came and corrected us is something that is simply not true. And that is the myth of Mfecane that needs to be corrected.
I think Gabriel, he doesn't want to listen. And I've noticed a lot of white people are like that.
Yes.
They refuse to listen. You are telling them, as a black person, this and this is what I want. This and this is how you can fix it. But white people refuse, and instead they say, oh no, this is hurting my feelings. And they turn it into something about them again. Okay. So you coming here as a white person telling us you have no right to feel this way is a huge insult.
Mark Banks, what do you want to say as the only other white person in the room?
Well, I'm going to kill myself right now. I'm going to plug this chair in, and you will turn it on, and I will just...
I might hold on to the metal bars right there.
There are other ways. I've got an Amazonian blow dart, which I got the other day at China City, funny enough. Which brings me to my one worrying point that I've been toying with over the past couple of years is when one talks about the repatriation of land and wealth, and quite rightly so too, and reparation for the past. What I see happening now in the country is that the country is being sold off to the highest bidder, which is a little bit of a worry It's not necessarily the white people who are living in this country now who own all the land and the mineral rights and the harbours and the airports and the new runways that they put into places which are very, very rich in geological finds, where huge Chinese aircraft carriers fly in twice a month, who come in and just cream off hundreds of billions of dollars worth of wealth, which is legitimately done because it's been sold to them. Where is that all going to end?
When we come back, we'll ask, well, Gabriel has already given his response, are all white people racist? Don't go away. And welcome back to the big debate. What is racism? Is it offensive attitudes or insults? And does it include the benefits and privileges that come with being a specific race? In the context of South Africa, many people will say privileges that come with being a white person, even unintentionally as a result of race. Let's go back to 2016.
Are all white people racist?
100%. How can you be a white South African and not be racist?
I am not a racist person. I respect all people. I respect black people, white people, colored people. So I feel it's very offensive to say that all white people are racist. It's just not true.
We've gone through the TRC process, and what we haven't understood is how white people have benefited firstly from apartheid, and secondly how a particular group of white people in this country have become fabulously rich off the back of apartheid. There are two families in this country, the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts, who have as much wealth as 50% of our people. Sure. It's an extraordinary crime.
But what about Patches Motsepe? He's a multi-billionaire. So why aren't you mentioning him?
I hear what you're saying because, you know, you writing your books and the political elite in the ANC are not oppressed because you are doing the oppressing at the moment along with white. You are the gatekeeper of whiteness. Yes. And you sold us out.
We forget that white people today have the option of tapping out, right? So you can sing Jabulani and you can dance, but then you can also remove yourself from the lived experiences of the culture that you're trying. I'm sorry, I'm speaking. From the culture that you're trying to represent. That doesn't make you a bad person. It's just the truth of the situation. And I think in South Africa, this is really what the conversation needs to be about. We need to talk about, why did apartheid end? Why did colonialism end? It didn't end because people's perspectives and behavior changed. It ended because it was expensive. It ended because white people couldn't travel anymore. It ended because they couldn't go and play sport, because entertainment for white people was over. Therefore, they needed to bring equality. That's not, we need to be honest.
It hurts me to see somebody that I have fought for my entire life, okay, in my own way, in what I can do. I'm not a politician, I'm not a statistician, I can't do any of those things. What I can do is talk out about whinging whites that we have in this country.
To say that you fought for my freedom, you didn't fight for anything because I'm not free at the moment.
I merely said I did what I could. And one other thing, do you think for a second, I as a white person do not agree with both you and you?
I don't care. I don't care. At this point in time, white feelings, white opinions don't matter to me because I need the land. I need the land.
I need the land.
Julle kan ons erfenis vat. Wanneer julle het ons nasie gevat. Ek het vir my mense voorheen gewaarsku dat julle is ons land se eie gif, a disease that must be contained into townships. Please understand that snuffing out your lights at night was our way of keeping our hopes alive and yours from resurfacing.
No. Wait. I'm sorry for my blood. That not enough of it was shed, that the blood on me was always yours, not mine, that every step I take leaves footprints in your blood. I'm going to breathe in and dissolve.
You forget to mention that whiteness was a prerequisite, so I guess the helix of your DNA is the corporate ladder that you climb to be above us. Even our flag segregates us, betrays us, by trading in the fields and goals that you bought with our blood on our land.
Zethu, what sort of emotion does it stir up for you?
It's sadness. We're going to run circles around this question of, are white people racist? Are they racist? Is this person racist? Are you born with racism? Is racism learned perpetually forever? Because people will defend whiteness, people will defend their privilege. It's just definitely sad.
So what then do we do, Zethu? Do we just stop having the conversation?
No, absolutely not. I think the conversation needs to happen earlier. It needs to happen honestly. It needs to happen historically, factually, because Black history is folklore, because it's told verbally. It's not in a book. South African history starts in writing when the white man arrived in South Africa. Until we can come to a common agreement that even the foundations of our society was dismantled by racism, and teach it to its extreme form. It's not enough that the most racist thing a white kid sees when they're in school in history is the Hector Peterson image. That's not enough, because that is not even a fraction of the level of brutality and pain that was involved in that system. And I think until we can honestly depict what racism is and what apartheid was on an educational level, we'll be able to tackle things like this one day. Because right now, it doesn't look as bad as it did. It's the same thing with slavery. Slavery is not taught to the great extent that it could be in schools. Great white sharks changed their entire migration patterns because people were being thrown off of ships. That's not included in history books. That's something you learn once you really dive into the transatlantic slave.
So how do we make our history mainstream then, Jackie? Especially when you consider that there's an entire generation of children who've been born post-1994 in what ideally is supposed to be an entirely different country, but not so much.
It's crystal clear that white people do not want to be reminded or do not also want to be taught about the atrocities and the evil, and I say again, the sheer barbarism that they perpetrated. Taking my cue from Zethu, there is a massive onslaught on the teaching of Black history in the US. Books written by the greats such as Toni Morrison have been banned. There's an onslaught in academic freedom at university level, where concepts and theories and disciplines such as critical race theory, which attempt to teach white students about the atrocities committed in the name of whiteness, white imperialists are saying, stop that nonsense, we don't want to hear about it. And this is on an international level. It also explains how the education system in South Africa works, where you have private, i.e. independent examination board in the private school, over-resourced, highly expensive and commodified, where white people are not interested in inclusivity, in honesty about teaching the real South African history, where the white race is put in their historically accurate place.
Okay, we've addressed perhaps the lack of literature, right? Formal tools to teach about this. Gabriel, what conversations are being had either by yourself or your immediate community with the young white children about racism, what it is, and especially its context in South Africa?
The children that I know all know very well that you ought to judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin.
Do you talk to them about apartheid?
Absolutely.
And what do you say?
That it was a sin, that it was a crime, that it was evil and stupid. The problem in South Africa today with this redistribution idea, the idea that whites have enough money that they can, if they were only to open up their pockets and stolen money, if only they could open up their pockets and give it away, that would cure poverty in South Africa, which is, I think, what we all really agree is the biggest problem. Is that there isn't that much money in the country. And the way to get more money in the country is, I think, by having the attitude of Martin Luther King Jr., of judging people on the content of their character, by working together, by doing what most South Africans say when we ask them, how should you appoint people for jobs in the government? How should you do service delivery? Should you do it by race or should you do it by merit? 20 to 25% say do it by race. I only want black people to get jobs. I only want black people to get contracts. Presumably, like most panelists, they think all whites are evil.
It's also a lack of having authentic, genuine, long-term friendships with people of color and black people. Because it's not about, I hate to say this, Black Lives Matter. Of course, all lives matter.
Exactly.
White people are racist. Of course, there are white people who have worked to change that entirely. You're pointing at us and saying, a panel of people who just believe all white people are racist. We have best white friends and colleagues who have integrated themselves within black culture, black societies, who understand black tax, who know that, yes, of the percentage of black millionaires that you name, those millionaires are earning a salary to funnel it down the system because we have parents and grandparents who are still in the rural area. It doesn't matter how wealthy we will become, there will always be a cousin who is too poor for something. We grow up in homes where the dompas is a thing that we see before we have even gone to grade 1. We know what black history is, but black history is taught in the context where racism could be dismantled, white supremacy and establishments and whatever the English word is, it could be. But it's taught at such a later stage, and I do have 2 kids, and I can say that it is changing to a degree.
Right. How does one make sense of racial classification in a new South Africa? Still in 2016, here's how that conversation flowed when we had it on the Big Debate.
You talk about racism against black people. You also talk about white farmers being killed. Whilst there's no mention that the second largest population group in this country, not being white, them being colored.
Colored people fall under black people. Why you feel you must hold on to that identity and why it then leads to the exclusion that you're talking about?
There can be many reasons, but the sole reason is we are a social construct in this country. Secondly, constitutionally, we have the right to associate us with whomever we want to. Yes. We are coloreds. There's nobody representing us here. I'm just asking for fairness. I'm saying if we are really serious about speaking about racism, let us give each other a fair chance. Let us say there must be a black person, there must be a colored person, a white person, an Indian person. But you can't say let's talk seriously about racism, but you exclude us.
Do Indian people feel the same way as colored people, that they are excluded, that they are a separate group and should be dealt with separately?
Well, I don't know. I'm not here as an Indian person. I'm here as a black South African woman.
Lexi, I want to put that to you because it was interesting to hear, right? The gentleman saying colored people are being left out of the conversation, essentially. You've got Ranjani, a former journalist who's an Indian woman, saying she stood up, in fact, on that day as a black South African woman. How much has the dial shifted on that chat today?
I agree with her. I am a black South African woman and my culture is colored. What I have learned is that in colored communities, we tend to isolate ourselves from black culture. Perhaps because we don't understand vernacular languages and we don't make that extra effort to try and understand black culture. We feel like black people are constantly rejecting us. And we feel that push from white people as well. So it's kind of like we've carved out this little box that we only fit in, and we feel like people put us in this box when we put ourselves in it. I believe that colored people have so much joy to be found in their blackness, so much happiness to be found in their blackness.
But not all of them want to be addressed as black, right, or classified as black.
Which I think is rooted in anti-blackness. We can go on and on talking about texturism, about colorism in our communities, about how you need to straighten your hair, or they call you a vuskant. You know, how you need to do certain things to be kind of assimilation with whiteness. The lighter you are, if your eyes are green, blue, then, you know, you are amazing. You're that colored person that everybody wants. It's all about the assimilation to whiteness. So it's not just like our economy is dependent on the white man. Our beauty standards are dependent on the white man and these standards that they've set out for us. And I think colored people have pushed themselves so much into those white standards, into whiteness, that they've forgotten their roots.
Thank you for that, Lexi. We do have to go. When we come back, we'll take a look at transformation and broad-based black economic empowerment, as it's now known. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Big Debate. Apartheid used job reservation for white people to entrench racial privilege. Now, in the democratic era, we have broad-based black economic empowerment. But is it working?
Black economic empowerment was invented by the economic oligarchs to co-opt the leaders of the black nationalist resistance movement and to dissuade them from following left-leaning, socialist-leaning policies, some of which are expressed in the Freedom Charter.
Jackie, was BEE ever going to work for all black people?
BE is borrowed, plagiarized from America, which had its moment of trying to accommodate its very tiny black minority. In the South African context, I don't understand how giving 20%, 26% stake to black people in untransformed white corporations was going to really bring about the kind of change that redress legislation ought to bring about. It was a complete failure. The ANC is on record to have said that BEE was also suggested by white people in this country. I think that there should have been an idea and a program of building 100% black-owned institutions through government money or through money from white people, as opposed to myself becoming a very minority stakeholder at Old Mutual or Anglo and have no influence in how the company works.
I've got you. Gabriel, would you want legislation that's supposed to see the transformation of this economy kept in place? By that I mean triple BEE, affirmative action.
No, I think it should be scrapped. I did a lot of work on the lobbying side, public participation on the public procurement bill to replace the triple PFA. So the government spends R1 trillion a year plus on buying stuff, everything from toilet paper to transistors. And as Mr. Willie Matebula, the Chief Procurement Officer, said, there's a BEE premium. So more money gets spent for the same thing in order to buy it from a black company. And the cap is 11.1% on large contracts and 25% on small contracts. And the new law is going to remove that cap and say, instead, here comes a tender, we'll set it aside only for MK veterans or only for black youth or only for black women, etc. And we oppose that because we think you should be getting the most value for money. That's what the Zondo report advised. Even if you disagree with me about that, I hope we can all agree about this. We should know how much we're spending on those BEE premiums. My biggest complaint is that in the last 20 years, 24 years under the triple PFA, those BEE premiums have never appeared in the budget. So we don't know, are we spending 5 billion or 10 billion or 100 billion?
Ayanda, how would we still be able to transform this country's economy without affirmative action, without broad-based black economic empowerment?
I think it would be very difficult to do that if the economy is still owned by the people who have been benefiting by apartheid. We need to understand that triple BEE is not something new. In the 1920s, when the apartheid government realized that they have a poor white problem, 100%. They decided to start state-owned enterprises such as Santam, which was started around that time, and you also have Bankop, which has now become ABSA, was started as a part of those state-owned enterprises as well. And so I think that there is a benefit to this. But to what Mr. Thembekile was saying...
Yeah, it's Thembekile.
He does make a point to say that unfortunately only a small group of people have benefited from this. And unfortunately it has led to the problems that we're seeing today when it comes to transformation. To just, agree, co-sign this point, the apartheid regime made it possible to offer jobs as part of legislature. So there's no way that we can let these people tell us that we aren't allowed to have the same thing.
But wasn't it bad? Sorry, just
no.
But you're benefiting now.
But it was bad,
But
right?
you're benefiting
it was the
now.
wrong thing to do.
Are you benefiting or
no? Let's allow the person I gave the floor to finish her point.
We won't debate that it was bad or not. What we're trying to establish at this point is to rectify the consequences of that.
When we come back, we ask for a way forward. Can we break free from how apartheid structured South African society? Stay with the big debate. This is The Big Debate. Welcome to the final part of our conversation, a reflection on South Africa's democracy, as well as race relations and, of course, racism in South African society. Now, as we conclude, Mark Banks, your final thoughts on everything we've been talking about over the last hour.
Yes, we were talking the last hour, and I'm still here. I'm still in this country. I still see great hope for South Africa. I'm very, very glad that we have moments like this daily, twice daily if need be, all day. In fact, I'd want to start a racist anonymous group where people who think they're racist, they can come to us and we can sit them down.
Will you charge? Maybe we can use that for reparations.
We could. We'd make millions. And if people feel racism coming on, they can phone up and say, I think it's coming on, and they can come to us and we can deal with them and torture them if need be, or make them sort of walk the plank through ice-cold water, or go into Johannesburg Zoo and fight with a polar bear if it's really, really bad. I think we do have a core of hope. I just hope we could all work at what we should be working at, which is huge. It's vast, what we still have to do.
Zethu, can we get it done?
Bearing in mind everything we've spoken about today, I also think that it is important to hold our current government accountable for what goes on. You know, as much as there's a great deal that is the consequence of apartheid that has put black people where they are today and created these structures. But I also think that sometimes politicians use this information and this knowledge in order to manipulate us. Look at the NHI bill that was passed. Many diverse groups of South Africans, including the public, experts, and stakeholders, spoke out against it. But what did the president say? This is all white fear. So some things that are regarding racism are being used against us, while some things regarding racism are true.
Ayanda?
There is a great sense of importance that is being placed on making sure that white people accept us and see the human in us. And I think that as black people, we need to let that go. We are not going to find humanity from these people. We need to stop asking for it. We need to stop demanding for it, and we need to take back what is ours by any means necessary. Fortunately, we live in a constitutional democracy, and one that I will make sure that I fight to protect with my life. But at the same time, we need to realize that within this constitutional democracy exists people who are privileged enough to stand here and say that we not deserve to feel human, we not deserve to have the land that was stolen back from us, and we need to reject that with the veracity that it deserves.
Jackie, do you leave you hopeful?
Certainly not. Ayanda reminds me of a great black man who was enslaved and ended up as a statesman. His name was Frederick Douglass, and he said many great things. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never has, it never will, and there is no progress without struggle. Race relations are power relations, and white people are not going to give up that power. They will find any excuse to avoid coming to terms with the history and doing what needs to be done. What does Steve Biko tell us? The only antithesis to white supremacy is black power. What is black power? It is black people coming together and not allowing to be divided on the basis of political parties, and telling white people that as a group, and there are good and bad within you, in the same way that there are good and bad within us, but as a group, you've wrongfully benefited, and as a group, we've been unjustly treated, and we have been oppressed and exploited, and effect that power, not ask, not demand, not conversate. We need some very decisive action on the part of black people to usher us into something.
On that note, Lexi.
As aggravating as a lot of this conversation was, I think there is hope. I think our youth, they really have what it takes in order to move us forward. And I also look at Mark, and I'm grateful that he is someone that listens. That is what we want from white people. We want them to listen, not be the first one to take over a conversation, to speak when they haven't been spoken to. That is all we want, to be heard. I think this conversation was very empowering and belittling in some ways, but for the most part, I do have hope.
Last two voices.
Stats SA has shown, and this really is news, and it's very different if you're comparing 2013 to 2024, that today, most people in the highest income bracket are black. Most people in the second highest income bracket are black. Going down all of the income brackets, most people are black. I think that's good news.
Have any of your views changed, Gabriel?
I think that's a view that I've introduced that no one in this panel knew before, and that no one in the audience knew before, because that data is on Stats SA's website, but it hasn't been reproduced in any newspaper or on any news channel. So I'm here to share facts with the audience and for the audience to take away what they would like from the fact that the president is black, the chief of the police is black, the chief of the army is black, and most
you haven't
rich
changed
people
your view.
Are black. Those are facts that I think are important
You haven't changed
and
your views.
unrecognized by those who wish to say that whites run the show, which is what several people have said, erroneously.
Like Ayanda said, we should stop trying to appeal to our oppressor for humanity, because every time we do that, we go deeper into the trap and they find new ways or new parts of our humanity to colonize. We are lucky enough to be at a point where we can quite literally just call them white people to their face. At some point, they wouldn't have allowed us to do that because of the ego, the feeling, and all that. Even if we can have these stats thrown at our faces that, no, you guys are actually doing great, we can't look at them to validate us anymore, and we should be okay with understanding that they're not going to save us. They didn't try. They've never even wanted to apologize. Right. We just have to do it ourselves. The problem is so many of us are so deeply poor, and we only have examples of white wealth, or just more examples of white wealth than we do of black wealth. So if those aspirations still stay there, then we're trapped. But I do have hope. I think a lot of us are tired now.
Thank you all for being on The Big Debate. That has been a very spirited conversation, to say the least, and the remnants of apartheid are still seen and felt by the majority of people in South Africa. How far are we from a truly non-racial society where all can live with dignity? Well, you decide. Our live shows will start again next week. Don't miss a packed studio next Thursday on the 13th of June to talk about healing and the way forward for South Africa. Bye-bye.